This is checks and balances, keeping any branch from becoming too powerful. Just a little bit of background on the Founding Fathers. As you may remember, these were some pretty paranoid dudes. They had just come out of a very bad relationship with England, and they were never, ever, ever, I'm not going to sing Taylor Swift, but they were never, ever, ever going to allow one person or group of people to have too much power over them and thus take away their rights. So their goal was to prevent another Britain. The question was, how are they going to do this with their new government? Well, there were a couple of ways. First, you learned about federalism. Federalism is how the Founding Fathers divided tasks and responsibilities among local governments like Upper St. Clair, state governments like Pennsylvania, and the national government in Washington, D.C. And then they created, at the national level, 3 branches of government. But within that, they created something called checks and balances. Checks and balances was and is the system that is meant to ensure that the president, the Congress, or the judges don't become too powerful and take away the rights of ordinary Americans. So this is how checks and balances work. You're going to be using your note sheet that was given in class. You'll notice that on the note sheet, in the middle section right now, you should be writing the power of the legislative branch is to make laws, and you already know that. And then we're going to talk about how did the Founding Fathers make sure that the legislature, the Congress, the House and the Senate didn't make laws that would make them kings, that would give them unbelievable wealth, or that would strip the rights of ordinary Americans. There's our average ordinary senator. How do they make sure that they do not get too powerful and muscular? They did this by creating checks. So to the left of the first box that says legislative branch, we're going to find out how does the executive branch, how does the president check the power of the Congress? First, he can propose laws. He can go in public, he can speak for these laws, he can go on television, he can whip up support for these laws. So this gives the president, while he doesn't make the laws, the ability to influence what laws are being made. Secondly, the president is given the veto power. So if the Congress was out of control in passing laws that were not in the best interest of the American people, the president has the option, the ability to veto or cancel those laws. In addition, the president can force special sessions of Congress. If an emergency takes place, the president can force Congress to come back from their vacations to deal with that. So on the left side, that's how the president checks the power of the legislative branch. But what about the judicial branch? The judicial branch has one very important power. That is their ability to declare laws unconstitutional. So if, for example, as we talked about yesterday, Congress were to pass laws about segregating the races, the judicial branch, the courts, could look at those laws and declare that they do not follow the Constitution. As such, they would be eliminated, null and void, illegal, bye-bye. So there's our mighty, mighty congressman, and perhaps he's not so strong. Which then leads us to the president. So these are the powers that you should write down for the president. As you know, these are all things that he can do. This should go in the middle box. He can veto laws. He can negotiate treaties. He is the commander-in-chief of the military. He appoints ambassadors. He appoints Supreme Court justices. All of these are powers of the United States president. They were very fearful. What if this guy becomes king? What if he controls the military and uses it against the American people? How will the president, or how will we prevent the president or the executive branch from getting too strong or becoming like Superman? So how did they do that? They gave, again, the other 2 branches the ability to check or limit the power of the president. From the legislative branch, there are a couple of ways that they limit what the president can do. First, they didn't want the president to have the ability to veto every single law that Congress passed. So they put in a provision that allows Congress to override the presidential veto. Again, this only takes place with a 2/3 vote of both houses of Congress, but nonetheless, it is a power that the Congress has. In addition, they didn't want the president to be able to make treaties with any country saying anything that was not necessarily in the best interest of the nation. So before treaties go into effect, they must be ratified or approved by the United States Senate. Another important check on the power of the president is the fact that only Congress can declare war. So while the president is in charge of the military, gets to pick military leaders, gets to decide how the military will fight battles, he cannot send the Army and Navy and Air Force and Marines all over the world without first getting Congress's permission. That permission comes in the form of a declaration of war. And lastly, they can remove the president if, in fact, he is not doing what he should be doing, if he's violating the law. All of those are ways that the legislative branch checks the executive. Then we have the judicial branch. They check the executive by declaring actions that the president may undertake as being unconstitutional. So the president, if he acts in a way that is violating the Constitution, the president or the president's actions can be shot down by the Supreme Court if, in fact, they are unconstitutional. So you have your president. So powers of the Supreme Court. There's Chief Justice John Roberts. Their primary power, again, is to determine the constitutionality of a law or action taken in government. Big power, and they hear all disputes between states. So, we have the Supreme Court with their awesome power and their awesome responsibility. The Founding Fathers did not want the Supreme Court to be able to declare every single law unconstitutional if it was not, in fact, unconstitutional. So they gave the other two branches the ability to check or control the power of the judges. The legislative branch does this, in one very important way. The first, and if you remember yesterday, the only two ways to change a judicial decision by the Supreme Court is one, to change the Constitution. Well, they gave the legislative branch, the Congress, the power to propose amendments which would in fact change the Constitution and then overrule decisions made by the judges. In addition, the legislative branch has a say in who will actually become a Supreme Court judge. While the president gets to pick the people that he wants to be the judge, they first must be approved by the United States Senate. So again, the Senate, as part of the legislative branch, controls who ultimately becomes a judge. And lastly, they can impeach judges for wrongdoing or violating their obligations as a Supreme Court justice. The executive branch checks the judicial branch by first appointing judges. Again, the president gets to pick the people that will serve in these positions. And he can also pardon federal offenders. So even though the law, as supported by judges, may suggest that a person is guilty and required to pay a certain fine or a certain punishment, the president can override that and excuse that person from their crimes. So the moral of the story about checks and balances. So again, checks and balances are meant to limit the power of the three branches, of the legislative, the Congress, the executive, the President, and the judicial, the Supreme Court.